Hey guys, this is Clinton Jeff and this is the Realme X. It's the phone that almost everybody in India has been talking about right now. The Realme X is a lot of things. It's the most premium smartphone they've made so far, and it's really gorgeous, including the fact that at the front there's an OLED 6.53-inch Full HD Plus display with a nice little pop-up selfie camera at the top. And if all of that wasn't too bad, there's also an in-display fingerprint sensor as well. There's also a Sony IMX586 48 megapixel camera at the back and a whole bunch of other premium specs that are usually very well out of this price range. Alright, so we've already covered the unboxing of the Realme X and the special Spider-Man edition at that. So let's get straight to the review. Okay, I'm going to break this review into 5 main sections: design, hardware, software, camera and battery before we decide on the verdict overall. Alright, let's start with design. The Realme X has a gorgeous design with a plastic back and frame. And don't you just love a phone with a notchless display? Seriously? Be gone, evil notches. No, but seriously, notches are not cool nowadays. I'm not a big fan of them. So I'm happy to see this new implementation that all these new companies are trying now. Apart from having Gorilla Glass 5 up front, the Realme X also features a 6.53-inch 19.5:9 aspect ratio OLED screen at 1080 by 2340 pixel resolution, which works out to about 394 ppi. The maximum brightness is also a pretty high 450 nits. It will also go all the way down to 2.4 nits. So this is definitely one of the nicest displays in this price range, both indoors and outdoors as well. And because it's an OLED screen, it boasts some pretty deep blacks with nice punchy oversaturated colors. And as you'd expect, you can also tweak it to be more warmer or colder depending on how you like it. Now the phone isn't truly bezel-less. There's a bit of a chin at the bottom, but I actually do like it because it kind of helps with an area to rest your thumb. And it's also a slightly higher point to initiate all those gestures. Apart from all of this, there's also an under-display optical fingerprint scanner. It's not an ultrasonic scanner, but it's still really fast. The scanner is placed a comfortable distance above the bottom of the display, and there's a lift to activate feature that works well enough, and the sensor is always ready for you when you pick up the phone. The phone unlocks really quick, so there's no complaints here. Worth mentioning is that you can also set up face unlock on the Realme X. It works well enough, but it means the pop-up selfie camera keeps having to pop up. The screen lights up to help in dimly lit conditions, and you can also set to require your eyes to be open for the phone to unlock. But because of all of that popping up, I wouldn't really recommend face unlock. Now coming to that pop-up selfie camera. It's really awesome to see this in a phone in this price range with the module popping up whenever you open the camera app or whenever you trigger face unlock. Realme promises that this will be good for at least 200,000 actuations, and the selfie camera is also apparently covered with sapphire glass as well. Also, as you'd expect, the entire module will automatically retract whenever it thinks you're about to drop the phone, or if it senses you manually trying to push it back in. Also at the front is a tiny slit above the display that houses the earpiece where the glass meets the frame. It's a weird arrangement, but it works pretty fine and sounds good, so no complaints. It's also worth mentioning that underneath this display there's also the ambient light sensor and proximity sensor, but curiously enough there's no notification LED light, which is kind of a bummer but not really a big deal. Alright, moving on to the back of the phone, there's a centrally aligned camera assembly with a gold ring around the primary module, which seems to be Realme's signature new design decision. But apart from that, the back panel has a really interesting S-type reflection based on how light hits it, which actually helps it look a lot more expensive of a device than it actually is. Coming to the right side, there's a nice large power button next to the dual nano SIM card tray area, while on the left side you'll find the volume buttons. On the bottom, the Realme X has a much appreciated headphone jack next to a USB Type-C port and a speaker grill for the loudspeaker and primary microphone. The down-firing single loudspeaker is actually pretty decent, but you have to be careful not to block it with your hand. And sound output out of that headphone jack is actually really good. Moving on to the top, you'll find just a tiny pinhole for a secondary noise cancelling microphone, and you'll also see the pop-up camera very centrally aligned. The Realme X measures 161.3 by 76.1 by 8.6 millimeters and weighs in at about 191 grams. So while it's not a small phone, it's still a very comfortable size to use. Though that being said, you'll definitely not be able to reach all corners of the screen with one hand. As you can see, I got the cool little polar white color, but the Realme X also comes in a nice little space blue color as well. Alright, let's move on to hardware. The Realme X is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 710 processor, which is an octa-core CPU with 2 cores at 2.2 GHz and 6 cores at 1.7 GHz with an Adreno 616 GPU. It also comes in either 4GB, 6GB or 8GB of RAM variants with either 64GB or 128GB of storage, but there's no microSD card slot. I understand it might be a minor annoyance for some of you out there. Alright, coming to benchmarks, you should know by now that benchmarks aren't a good way to judge a phone, but in terms of benchmarks, the Realme X actually performs pretty decent. In fact, performance is more or less the same as the Redmi Note 7 Pro and the Vivo V15 Pro. In addition to all of this, there's also a dual SIM 4G, there's Bluetooth 5.0, GPS, GLONASS, Wi-Fi, FM radio, USB Type-C, and there's still a headphone jack. Seriously, Type-C and a headphone jack, you should buy this phone just for that. Okay, let's talk about software. The Realme X runs Oppo's ColorOS 6.0 on top of Android 9.0 Pie. ColorOS has a really light color scheme with menus using a white background and gradients with light color accents. Though that being said, it looks like some menus are smart enough to realize that this is an OLED screen. So the appearance of some menus have a darker background and black themes instead. There's also a few pre-installed apps, which is kind of a bummer, but thankfully you can uninstall all of them. Overall, it's pretty much what you'd expect from any Android skin nowadays, with an ever-changing magazine type lock screen that you can disable to a normal lock screen instead, and a much appreciated app drawer. Seriously, I'm a huge fan of the app drawer, so I'm very happy to see an app drawer here. The drop-down notification drawer features quick toggles, a brightness bar, and everything you'd expect. And the multitasking menu looks a little bit familiar but works well enough with the gesture navigation. There's also split screen multitasking, which allows the ability to snap 2 apps together. And there's also a cool new gesture where you can swipe in from the side and hold to switch between your last 2 recently opened apps. ColorOS also has its own photos and music apps along with a file manager, and there's a much appreciated game space feature which lets you choose to ignore all incoming notifications when playing games like PUBG. I know that there's a lot of PUBG fans out there who are going to definitely appreciate this feature. All in all, ColorOS is pretty fine. You'll either love it or hate it, but it's improved a lot in the last couple of years. Alright, time for my favorite topic, the camera. At the back of the Realme X, the primary camera uses a Sony IMX586 sensor, which is a 48 megapixel quad Bayer type with a 1x2 inch overall size and a 0.8 micron meter pixel pitch. This is paired with a f1.8 aperture 26mm equivalent lens, but this is missing OIS, which is weird but understandable in this price range. There's also a 5 megapixel f2.4 aperture depth sensor to help with bokeh shots and a single LED flash as well. And just like you'd expect from most phones nowadays, the Realme camera app has an AI scene recognition, so you'll notice a small icon pop up whenever a scene is successfully recognized. Things like pets or food or a sunset, and just like most company AI cameras, the scene recognition works pretty well. One thing I will mention is that there is a 2x zoom toggle, but you should remember that this is a digital toggle since there is no telescopic lens on the Realme X. Apart from that, there's the usual flash and HDR settings. There's a new Chroma Boost toggle. Chroma Boost is an advanced HDR mode that takes a combination of images and has some improvements in dynamic range and color reproduction. There's also a bunch of other shooting modes. For example, there's the Expert mode, which is manual settings. There's slow-mo, nightscape for low-light shots, time-lapse, and pano for panoramas. Nightscape works pretty well and is a long exposure handheld mode for night photos, just like Pixel's night sight. You'll also see that there's an ultra 48 megapixel mode. So the default shooting mode is 12 megapixel, but you can switch over to the full 48 megapixel resolution. This will give you photos with more fine details, but I'd only advise using this in really good lighting situations. Alright, so coming to camera quality, daytime photos from the Realme X look gorgeous with a nice wide dynamic range, vivid colors and high contrast as well. Some high contrast scenes might mean a loss in some details, but all in all, I actually really like the camera. Images have a lot of sharpness and detail. but I tended to leave chroma boost and HDR mode switched off. But the AI mode does a really good job regardless. In terms of low light images, the Realme X camera still does a really good job with solid colors and good details, but it does tend to underexpose shots every so often. Nightscape images have a slight drop in detail but have much better highlights. Switching over to portrait mode, the Realme X actually takes really good portraits. Subject detection is one of the best I've seen in the price range, with subjects very nicely isolated with great precision for very pleasing results overall. I was actually really impressed by it. Coming to selfies, at the front is a 16 megapixel f2.0 camera that supports 1080p video recording at 30 frames per second. Whenever you open up the camera app or trigger anything that requires the front-facing camera, the Realme X's motorized mechanism will pop right up to expose the fixed focus camera. Now that being said, as you'd expect from most companies based in Asia, there's a bunch of software beautification enhancements built in to help take that perfect selfie. There's skin smoothening, eye enlargement, jawline thinning, and a whole bunch of others. You'll either really appreciate these features or really hate them, but you can just switch them off. Either way, they're there in case you want to use them. So talking about front camera quality, under good lighting, you can actually get some really good detailed selfies out of the Realme X. In dimmer lighting, there's a bit of a drop in sharpness and some aggressive noise reduction, but overall the colors are actually pretty good with very wide dynamic range. And even though there's no front-facing depth sensor camera like the rear camera, portrait mode on the front camera is actually still pretty good, isolating the subject and blurring the background. Coming to video recording, the Realme X records 4K video at up to 30 frames per second, but if you record at a lower 1080p, there's stabilization as well. Overall video quality is pretty good with tons of detail, but there tends to be a little tiny bit of noise creeping in. Dynamic range and color reproduction is good, just like with the photos, but sometimes clips can look a tiny bit over-sharpened. Overall, the camera on the Realme X is actually really good for the price range, and I'm actually really impressed by it. Alright, let's talk about everybody else's favorite topic, battery life. The Realme X is powered by a 3765 mAh battery, and there's also support for Oppo's 20-watt Wok 3.0 charging. This can actually fill a completely empty battery from 0 to 50% in just 30 minutes or 0 to full in just about an hour and 20 minutes-ish. The battery on the Realme X can easily survive a day of moderate to heavy usage, but having that Wok charging is definitely appreciated. If you're about to leave your office in the evening for a fun night out, or if you're at a friend's place and just need to top up a little bit, that fast charging is very appreciated. Alright, so what's the conclusion? What do we think of the Realme X? The fact that everyone's been talking about this phone already says enough. In terms of competition, there's not really much out there. There's the Vivo V15 Pro, which has a wide-angle camera but also costs a lot more. And then there's the very obvious competitor with the Xiaomi Redmi K20. That phone has pros and cons of its own and costs a little bit more. But coming to the Realme X specifically, sure, there's a bunch of pros and there's very minor cons. But at the end of the day, the Realme X is just amazing value for money. It boasts a really nice display with no notch at all, solid battery life, great cameras at the back and front, plus you get that really cool pop-up selfie camera. There's even USB Type-C and a headphone jack as well. Honestly, the Realme X is just a really good purchase. In my time with it, I was actually really impressed with it, and it's so nice to see phones that can do this in this price range. So that's what I think about the Realme X. As always, if you guys have any questions about it, you can let me know right in the comment section below, or you can ask me right over on Instagram or Twitter at ClintonJeff. And if you don't agree with this conclusion, please let me know why. I'm really eager to know what everyone thinks about this phone right in the comment section below. But overall, I really am quite impressed with it. That's about it for me, guys. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button down below and don't forget to subscribe because that would be much appreciated. And that's about it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.